World Liberty Financial announces the launch of its tokens backed by Donald Trump amid the presidential race. We'll also explain the significance of this big drop on Binance, followed by a quick recovery. If we look at the 1-minute chart, we'll notice that this drop occurred in just 2 minutes. What impact will this event have on the crypto ecosystem? We'll break it down in detail. World Liberty Financial, an ambitious new decentralized finance protocol backed by former US President Donald Trump, has announced the launch of its tokens. And it does so at a key moment, with the US presidential elections just around the corner, with Trump as the Republican candidate. On October 11th, the company revealed on the social media platform X that the public sale of its tokens, Wolfie, will begin on October 15th. But there's an important detail: only those who qualify through the whitelist can participate. It's estimated that Wolfie aims to raise $300 million from this sale, and the project is already valued at no less than $1.5 billion. These tokens not only represent an investment, but will also grant their holders governance rights to actively participate in the ecosystem's decision-making. The team behind this initiative has a clear goal: to build a decentralized digital asset system accessible to everyone, enabling permissionless peer-to-peer exchanges. They also want the protocol to be user-friendly, featuring one-click social logins and simplified wallet creation. Wolfie was co-founded by Steve and Zach Wickoff, Zach Fulman, and Chase Arrow, with Donald Trump as one of the main supporters. Additionally, his 3 children serve as project ambassadors in the Web3 space. But that's not all, as crypto market analysts see this project as another sign of Trump's commitment to the crypto world. Lastly, on the decentralized prediction platform Polymarket, bettors give Trump a 54.6% chance of winning the election in November. There's no doubt that this project is generating a lot of interest. Clearly, Donald Trump is making a big campaign push for his political race, given that the presidential elections are just around the corner, and it certainly doesn't hurt to have the support of investors and crypto ecosystem advocates in the United States. These investors might think that if Donald Trump is behind such projects, theoretically, he wouldn't harm the crypto ecosystem from a legislative standpoint. That's what logic would tell us about this type of behavior. But we must not forget that Donald Trump has a vested interest in gaining votes during these months, so he's going to do everything he can to win over new supporters. And certainly, we can't know how genuinely involved he is with the crypto ecosystem, or if it's all just political marketing. Only time will tell.
On the screen, we have the Bitcoin chart on the 1-hour time frame, and we can see how, since the end of last week, we've experienced strong upward moves. Let's zoom out a bit to show you why, at Crypto Insight, we remain positive about the entire ecosystem. The first thing we must remember is that we are currently in a macro bullish Z wave. This macro bullish Z wave is nothing more than the correction of the previous downward impulse we've been dealing with for quite some time. After that impulse, we saw the corrective wave, which we've labeled with the W, followed by a weaker Y wave. While it was slightly higher than the W, it didn't have the strength to correct the impulse we're referring to. And then finally, we got this macro bullish Z wave. As you can see, here's its directive, which aligns with a key defense zone. This defense zone is still being respected, and as we know, as long as the Z wave's directive holds, the Z wave remains alive. Therefore, on a macro level, we stay optimistic. Keep in mind that we're analyzing a daily chart here, so everything I'm discussing is from a macro perspective. Now, moving to the 4-hour chart and zooming in even further, what do we see here? We've been experiencing an accumulation phase, which has come back to recognize the origin of the breakout, and at the same time, it reacted in that zone. What we experienced last week is crucial. Notice how, after recognizing the breakout origin, it revisited that zone again. Last week, we mentioned that this was a key point because if we lost that level, we could see the price drop significantly. But as you can see, the price reacted at that level, giving us a significant bullish impulse. Now, let's move to the 1-hour time frame where we can see much more information. What do we have here? Notice how the price falls and allows us to anchor a creek, which we've been evaluating for several days as part of a bullish accumulation phase. And look at how this accumulation phase reveals several things. The first thing we notice is that the price has been falling sharply, but suddenly with much higher volume compared to the usual volume of recent candles, the price reacts and reverses immediately. The same thing happens here. Notice how the price drops sharply, and with phenomenal volume compared to the previous candles, it also turns around very quickly. So here we're seeing absorption, and here as well, we have more absorption. Look at the volume we're talking about, always in comparison to the previous candles. As the process advances further, we see the same thing again. The price was falling with great strength, and suddenly we have a huge volume compared to the previous candles. Instantly, we get that reaction where the price shoots upward. This is nothing more than absorption. And why am I telling you this? Because clearly what we're analyzing here is a whack-off process, and we can see how it follows each of its steps. In fact, something very important is that after the strong impulse I just mentioned, take a look and we'll zoom in a bit how a defense zone is marked here. The price rises, anchors the zone, and defends it every time the price comes back to test it. And something else that we at Crypto Insight love is this trap. This trap was already signaling to us a future price increase. Notice how after the trap, they confirmed the zone with great precision and then the price skyrockets. Just as I mentioned earlier about the large candles indicating high volume, where we identified absorption, now let's analyze this final volume. I'll zoom in a bit more to make it super clear. Here we see disproportionate volume compared to the previous candles. At the same time, we see the price confirming the defense zone and shooting up in a single candle. In other words, it breaks the creek with immense force. So in this case, instead of absorption, we're seeing genuine buying. These are buys that push the price upward. Some of you may be wondering why we have this dotted line here. And yes, even though we are bullish and expect the price to continue rising, we're considering the possibility of a flat correction forming here. A flat correction that could come back, retest the creek, give us a bit of time, and then push the price higher. Because while we are positive, as I mentioned at the beginning of the analysis, this doesn't mean we can't see some corrections before continuing that upward impulse. Now let's move on to analyzing Ethereum. And for that, we're going to start with the 4-hour chart to show you why, in the long term, we maintain our bullish outlook. Here we're seeing several things. First, we have a bearish impulse that has allowed us to anchor a creek over which we're evaluating an accumulation process. And as you may already know, accumulation processes tend to break to the upside. Notice how even from a distance, you can see here this large drop we were just talking about, which immediately reverses and impacts the creek, but it does so with a massively disproportionate volume compared to what we had been seeing before. Look at the size of the previous volume candles compared to this one. So here we're assessing absorption that has managed to stop the price and turn it around. At the same time, notice how we're evaluating the potential formation of a complex corrective pattern, where we've already traced its possible directive. Because look, we have the drop we mentioned earlier, and we can already label the W and the Y. And why not aim for the upward breakout of this accumulation process to give us that Z wave? But not so fast. Let's first analyze the 1-hour chart to see what's happening with a bit more zoom. And here we see the story repeating itself. The fractal nature of the market allows us to see that, despite differences in time frames, the market reacts the same way. For this reason, notice how after the drop, we were able to anchor a creek here. This creek is also being evaluated as an accumulation process, but in this case, it has already broken to the upside. Also, note what I mentioned earlier about the volume. Once again, we see a significant amount of volume where the drop was halted. So here we have stopping volume. We see high volume throughout this zone where the price was falling and then recovered. The same thing happens here and here with high volume in both areas. But the case is different with this last volume we're seeing, because this volume managed to push the price upward, giving us that creek breakout. And just like in Bitcoin, we've already drawn this line here over which we are assessing the formation of the flat correction. We'll wait for this to develop, as you know, in proportion to the previous structure before seeking that move. Therefore, as I mentioned earlier, both on a macro and micro level, we are positive. However, in the very short term, we might expect the development of a flat correction. And now let's dive into the analysis of BNB, which gives us plenty of insight with that huge wick we saw this morning, coupled with the significant volume that we consider crucial for our analysis. But before we get into that,
welcome to Crypto Insight, your ethical and moral channel for cryptocurrency technical analysis. Here, we really know what we're talking about. We conduct advanced technical analysis that has been developed for over 12 years. We upload videos several times a week. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, let me know and leave a comment with your opinion. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so you don't miss the next opportunity.
All right, now we're looking at the BNB chart on a 4-hour time frame. What do we have here? This white line, which I'm now highlighting in yellow, is showing us the creek of an entire process we're evaluating as an accumulation phase. So as you might imagine, we're expecting that at some point this process will break to the upside. And take a look, I'm going to zoom out a bit on the 4-hour BNB chart so you can see this better. We're witnessing something similar to what we saw in the charts I showed you earlier. We have a price drop followed by a sharp recovery. Notice the pattern, very high volume. The same thing happens again. The price drops dramatically, recovers quickly, and surprise, the volume surges exponentially. Therefore, yes, we're assessing absorption in each of these candles. And what else do we usually see in accumulation processes? Well, typically toward the end of this process, the price gives us a defense zone or a supply line where it attempts to break through but fails. In this case, the price allows us to mark both a defense zone and a supply line. These are the points we had been analyzing in recent days because it was a zone to watch closely. If the price were to fall below this level, we knew further declines could continue. Now, let's switch to the 1-hour chart. As I mentioned earlier, fractality really is a great ally since it allows us to see similar processes across different time frames. We have the price drop and the anchoring of our creek, and yes, we're evaluating this as a micro accumulation process. Here we see the creek, and here is the well-known defense zone. This part is key to explain what's coming next. First, as we know, we have the drop with absorption, check the volume again, a drop with absorption, and then the famous compression against the creek marked by a defense zone. But let's zoom in a bit more. Let's go to the 15-minute chart to analyze the price specifically against the defense zone. We can anchor it here and see it respecting this level again here. The same thing happens throughout this entire zone, and then we get a trap. And as you know, here at Crypto Insight, we have our thoughts on traps. We consider sweet spots for entry. Why? Because they're the ones that will give us the most potential in searching for that movement we're expecting. At the same time, once we get the trap, confirmation is gold. This new contact with the zone confirms that yes, this was the valid area, the one being defended. Let's zoom in a little to focus on the candle we're so interested in. It's a candle where almost 90% of its range is just the wick. So what can we see here? The price went up and down, or rather, it dropped and then rose with incredible speed. And here, as you can see, I have two blue lines marked. Now let's switch over to ATS, where we'll analyze what's happening inside this candle. Let's zoom in just on this one. What stands out here? We have an overwhelmingly disproportionate trading volume in this area around 570 and also around 562 price zones that might carry a lot of psychological weight. So heading back to TradingView, back to the chart, still in the 15-minute time frame, now you understand what these two blue lines are all about. It's right within this wick where the majority of the trading volume was concentrated. And what a coincidence, they didn't let the price fall below this defense zone. What does this tell us? It means that this area remains critical. So it's a zone we're still monitoring closely. So going back to the chart where we can see the clusters along with the volume, what do we see here? Or rather, how should we interpret everything I'm showing you? Well, here we're seeing absorption. It's similar to what we saw in the previous charts, but here it's happening much faster. This was a 1 minute to the next type of movement. We see the volume spike, the price falling sharply, and then immediately recovering. So when we compare the effort to the result, it's telling us there was strong selling pressure. Look here, we can see the divergence between the selling force in this candle and the outcome, which didn't match up. As a result, the price is immediately pushed back up. In the end, this wick is giving us a strong bullish impulse that we'll continue to monitor closely. And why do I say we'll keep monitoring it? Because of course, we're keeping an eye on this blue line, which marked the first cluster, and this second blue line, which marked the second most important cluster. Why am I telling you this? Because while we are bullish, the price can clearly still drop. But if we see it fall below this area or below this one, which would also bring it near the defense zone, then we might not see the bullish move we're expecting, or at least not as quickly as we're hoping. The price could continue developing this micro accumulation process we've been discussing. However, we assign a low probability to this scenario as we believe this process is ready to take off, especially considering what's happening inside this wick and the strong absorption that's giving us bullish momentum.
Now, let's analyze what Solana's 4-hour chart is showing us. As you know, Solana is an asset that's been performing really well in the long term, especially within the crypto ecosystem. I've just highlighted Solana's defense zone, and for some time now, we've been speculating and discussing the possibility of a macro compression against a key area. If we zoom in, we can identify an entire accumulation process where we're analyzing the volume profile. On one hand, we've identified the POC, the point of control, which is the level with the highest transaction volume within this range at a price level of $132.16. But look here, and I'll zoom in to make it even clearer. The second point, with the next highest transaction volume, is where we've drawn our blue line around the price level of $134.11. We wanted to mark this because, as I've been explaining, many cryptos are working around an advanced defense zone, which places them in a critical position. But as you can see, Solana doesn't allow us to identify that kind of defense zone. This helps us understand why the price had to drop to where it did, down to the $134.11 level, before seeking the opposing move. Essentially, they went to look for liquidity within this entire accumulation process, not to be confused with the liquidity explained in smart money concepts, which is a complete nonsense. Instead, in a more objective way, by studying volume, we can clearly see where liquidity is located, levels where, not too long ago, investors were very active and where they might be interested again in the future. All right, now that we've understood this, let's switch to the 1-hour time frame. Take a look at this dotted line where we've placed the creek, which we believe is part of an accumulation process. Here we have the classic advanced defense zone just before breaking the creek, and they've already generated the Black Swan event. Overall, Solana is giving us reasons to be optimistic, and these are positive signs for the crypto market. What we want to see from Solana at some point is a breakthrough this trend line, which could lead to an interesting upward movement. This is what we're looking for in the medium to long term. On a macro level, it's true that we find ourselves ourselves in a very large descending wedge, which is actually positive because if, down the line, a black swan event occurs here, and I have no doubt they'll go looking for it, we'll see when and how it happens. They could target this creek, where we might see a small correction, and then the real party begins. However, we're still a bit far from that kind of event, so for now, let's focus on the short term. Let's see what's happening. But before that, if you want to be part of Crypto Insight Premium, where I tell you our members are constantly improving, you can do so through this access form. You'll need to be a user of Bitget, Binx, or BitUnix with our referral code, have deposited a minimum of $100 in cryptocurrencies into your account, and use this account as your main futures trading account. This is essential to stay in the group, as will be explained later. Once you meet these 3 requirements, you can fill out the form, which asks you about 5 or 6 questions. You'll find this form in the description and in the pinned comment of this video. Our friends at BitUnix have an active promotion for the Crypto Insight community. That's really interesting. If you deposit $100, they'll give you $25 in futures bonuses. If you deposit $300, you'll get $45. And if you deposit $500, they'll give you $75. You can find all the information about this promotion for new users on their website. I'll leave the link in the description and in the pinned comment of this video. Now, looking at Polkadot on the 1-hour time frame, what we're seeing is how the price has come to recognize the structure. Then, it made a clear trap over the defense zone before attacking the creek, which, in other words, could be the last point of supply. That being said, we're now at the point of breaking the creek, and this smells like they're ready to keep pushing up. So let's keep an eye on it, see if this keeps progressing. Why not wait to see if we get a flat pattern, and if this wants to continue? The magical goal here would be to break the wedge upwards. All of this remains to be seen, but we can stay positive, as we've been for the past 3 weeks. In the medium to long-term perspective, we remain optimistic. And now, take a look at Cardano. It's very interesting. We're in the middle of a descending channel on the 1-hour time frame. Here, we can observe how this zone is being defended, which is really interesting. And now, we're drawing a trend line that's also very interesting, and you'll soon understand why. Essentially, they've come here to acknowledge the structure, and they may have already made the last point of supply with no issues. So, why not? We could be close to breaking the structure and heading upwards. In a Wyckoff accumulation process, after the shakeouts like the ones we've been seeing here, we could be in the final stages of the accumulation process. That's why we're generally positive about the crypto ecosystem. For the past 3 weeks, as I've been telling you, we've been evaluating this accumulation process. And of course, with the intraday noise, we may have been more or less accurate on certain days, but we've been speculating on the construction of an accumulation process. If you ask us, based on what we're seeing in price behavior, it makes sense that significant bullish breakouts could be near. We see about all this is, remember, no one has a crystal ball, and it's best to keep your ego in check. If you found this advanced technical analysis interesting, let us know in the comments. Also, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so YouTube notifies you of future uploads. Best of luck in your life, and I'll see you in the next video.